Hello, I'm Yuki Hanyu, the founder of the Shojinmeat Project, citizen science community that's working on the open source DIY cell culture meat. And I originally prepared these slides for New Harvest 2020, but obviously the event got cancelled by COVID-19. So I decided to do the presentation at home and put it online. Yeah, just a quick introduction to what we do. Shojinmeat Project it aims for democratization of cellular agriculture, and we do things like open source cellular agriculture, or basically making meat, growing meat at home, and also teaching kids how to do it, and also we engage in like public communications activities. And we started in 2014, 2015-ish, and we have Integriculture company as a spin-off startup. And recently we have another startup which is a non-profit organization like New Harvest or Good Food Institute. It's called Cellular Agriculture Institute of the Commons. And back to the topic of cellular agriculture. So the progress being made by cellular agriculture community has been quite marvelous, and we've seen cell-based foie gras, milk, and like fish and meat and uh, basically various kinds of animal products are being made by cell culture technologies. And on top of that, the process has been now moving from laboratory scale to like industrial scale by adopting methods and techniques that suited more for scale. So originally people used to use like pipettes and cell culture dishes, but now people are moving into bioreactors, and which will eventually go to industrial scale. And when that happens, the sort of technology we primarily think about is no longer pipettes and dishes, but more about like chemical engineering, plant engineering sort of discipline. So it's coming fast, and but then there's a question. So let's say companies has been successful in scaling cell culture and putting the cell agriculture products to the market. But then will we have a monopoly company, and that monopoly company say driving farmers out of their jobs along with all the culinary and cultural diversity along with it, especially in poor countries. And there's another possibility, which is if those corporations um, take some aggressive stances with their intellectual property or make some mistakes with the public relations and communications, then what happened to the genetically modified foods could easily repeat. And all of these together at the end is the question of will people like it? Um, the possibility of cellular agriculture falling into the same situation as with GMO has been discussed before, especially in this literature by J.C. Rees. And in this literature, the GMO and cellular agriculture and how things rolled out and how the public reacted and as compared. Um, to give an idea what cellular agriculture should do and what should not do. But then, if we have to think about so what should farmers do and how exactly we should do, we should probably have some like more detailed idea of what is to happen in the near future with cellular agriculture. Then, and here's the rough schematic of the conditions that needs to be met for cellular agriculture to become mainstream. And the y-axis is the cost benefit. And that's basically like taste, convenience, and like Instagrammability or the ethical feel good factors, all of that involved, all that included, divided by the cost. And 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 that of the cost benefit of cell-based meat increases with the technology, whereas the conventional meat is more or less leveled out. And at some point, it probably it crossed this price parity point, and that is the point when when the consumers would actively choose cell-based meat over conventional meat. And when that happens, so-called the disruption or Kodak moment is, it is said that that kind of thing happens. And when that happens, the ripple effect would reach all the surrounding industries like transport, packaging, and processing, and all those things. And that point could be reached earlier for more expensive products such as beef earlier than chicken. And in countries that imports meat than those meat exporting countries, it's all down to the currently available unit price of the product. And then, let's say we've reached the price parity point. Then there's a crossroad here. One, we could go into a situation where cellular agriculture is a capital-intensive industry, or it could also turn out that it's not a capital-intensive industry. And between these two scenarios, we would see very different worlds. And if, let's say we calculate, so how much capital do we need to actually launch a cellular agriculture business? And that is also called what is the minimal efficient scale of cell-based meat? And this minimal efficient scale is basically the amount of capital needed to build a facility that's large enough to produce meat cheaply, so that it makes economic sense, and it basically have some market competitiveness. So this is a rough estimate made by Integriculture Company 2017, and it's a rough estimate. It could be wrong. And if you build a bioreactor that produces cell-based meat at 10 ton per month, that bioreactor would cost about $4.8 million, and that would make cost of meat at $5 per kilogram. And that means this $4.8 million, it's rather large, so probably we'll be seeing the community scale facility rather than like individual farmers installing their own facility. And let's say the Integriculture Company was wrong, and you actually need a much bigger facility to make price competitive meat, or it's basically high MES scenario. And in that situation, we will probably see large-scale, literal cellular agriculture complexes replacing petrochemical complexes. And in that sort of world, the cellular agriculture medium will be probably carried by tankers, and it will be an economy of scale is all that matters. So very high minimum emission, very high MES. So economy of scale is everything. And let's say things go the other direction. So it turns out that you would need only small bioreactor to make price competitive meat. In that situation, economy of scale is not everything, because then there will be room for other competitive edges. So we would see like millions of people, like local farmers, restaurants, and growing their own meat. And we will also see like open source cultured meat, non-proprietary recipes, and DIY meat, and all those things. So between these, that basically summarizes these two scenarios. So let's say price parity point is reached, and there are two possibilities: high MES scenario and low MES scenario. And then we would see two very different worlds. And with that in mind, so how would DIY meat affect, or what Shojinmeat Project is doing will affect that picture? So this DIY meat, I did this experiment in my kitchen, and that's the high school student repeating what I've done, and not just me, but me and other colleagues worked out these protocols, and it's available online, so you could check out later. Yeah, and these are DIY bioequipment being prepared. So that's the household fan used as a centrifuge and DIY incubator, and that's repurposing of towel warmer. And we're also using things like DIY clean bench and also using egg white as an antimycotic to fight off contamination. And all these efforts have basically have effects in two fronts. One is DIY meat and all those DIY bio stuff. It basically works to reduce the MES by making everything simpler, and so which makes more likely that we start from here as we reach price parity point. And the other is the existence of the fact that there is an ongoing DIY meat project basically shifts the business and industry decisions towards this direction. So it kind of acts like a tidal force toward democratization. And also, on top of that, we know that as the technology advances, everything becomes like easier, cheaper. So there's already background tidal force going toward the right anyway. So let's say the cellular agriculture moves toward democratization. So what are farmers going to do, or what are local restaurants and SMEs would do? And since beyond democratization scenario, so local farmers and town butchers could develop their own meat and come up with their own recipe, and hobbyists could do the same. And in such thing, one thing that the farmer could do is basically make the farmer's cow very famous, or call it like a say star cow. And there's already an animal talent agency for cats and dogs, so why not expand to like farm animals as well? So you go to a supermarket, there's a QR code on it, scan that code, and you get a YouTube live to see how the star cow is doing. And if showbiz is not the farmer's thing, then the farmer could decide to sell meat rather than cow, and meat has got higher unit price at 70 rather than cow, which is at 15. And the farmer would be installing these bioreactors in the backyard. Or the farmers could just license the cells. So all these things mean that the daily routine will be quite different. So since there will be less number of cows, the farmer will be scooping less shit. Yeah, this animal agriculture has never been an easy job. It involves a lot of heavy physical labor, and the farmer could be freed from those things. And instead, they will be doing like facility management and cell culture protocol development and so stuff like that, as in like breweries. So so it just it described the like novel business models, but this kind of like summarizes all. So that's fabless farmer. So you don't need to own a farm. You can basically um, um, ask another contract farmer to look after your cow, or you could be you could keep a very small farm and just send the license the sales, or you could just you could receive the sales from a farmer and develop your own meat and like upload online to share. So there will be different business models for farmers and hobbyists in if cellular agriculture is democratized enough to make these possible. And this is one of the possible scenes in that world, and that is like an urban cellular agriculture farmscape. So that's a very small farm in a heavily urban setting. So there's one cow here, and that's basically a cell extraction center where cells are extracted from these like farm animal, hopefully without any like pain inflicted, and it could also possibly like produce meat on spot. And if that's pushed to the extreme, so that's my imagination, but this kind of a solar punk scenery where like the farms and cities are merged, and there are community bioreactors and zero environmental footprint vertical farms and stuff like that. Well, I know that's fantasy. But if we had to go to that sort of like a direction of democratized cellular agriculture, so what technological frameworks are needed? And that would probably involve like inaccessible or inexpensive and accessible bioreactors and some accessible non-exclusive cell banks and commodity culture medium and the ways to share recipe, and also probably some sort of like IP protection scheme to prevent pirated or fake cultured meat. And besides technological, there's also like regulatory frameworks that needs to be considered. So like standard food safety rules, and that's like cell IP thing, and also the availability of like raw materials and like facilities of like who control them. But if we had to think about these things, we have to be careful about one thing, which is, but who can practically observe these rules? Because rule making these regulations could move into a direction where it implicitly exclude farmers and small and medium enterprises. So who can observe these rules in practice, and making these rules or the rule making activities. This is an example. This is basically what's going on in Japan at the moment, and there's a roundtable discussion going on with this Cellular Agriculture Institute of the Commons in collaboration with Tama University Center for Rulemaking Studies. And this roundtable discussion in in this discussion, the participants include like general public food companies and farmers and well, like various stakeholders. And say if like farmers and general public are missing from the list of participants, we could sort of imagine what kind of a direction or what sort of interest end up leading this rulemaking process. So it's quite important to have um, interests of all parties represented in rulemaking processes. So on the last note about this bad meat, I don't know if COVID-19 actually comes from bad meat, but let's say so. There's always a demand for that kind of exotic meat, but if cell-based meat is made by only big companies, they won't do like some niche products like bat meat. So there will always be people going out in the wild hunting bat meat and end up with a pandemic again. So to prevent that kind of thing, we need ability for people to make meat on their own. So key takeaways, and that's it from me for now. So thank you for your patience.